Well, another wild day of winter meetings, and we have more comments from the front office in regards to the direction of the offseason. We'll talk about that and more all today on Locked On Tigers.
You are Locked On Tigers, your daily Detroit Tigers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of Locked On Tigers. I'm, of course, your host, Scott Bentley. Today is Wednesday, December 11th, 2024. Thank you so much for making Locked On Tigers your first listen every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place just a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. Welcome in, welcome all. Happy Wednesday, everybody. Halfway point of the week here. So we have a lot to go over today. There was, as there always is, surrounding pretty much every day of winter meetings, a lot of drama, a lot of rumors and news and notes. In division, Cleveland had a heck of a day. We have the contract details of the Alex Cobb deal for the Detroit Tigers. We have Akil Baddoo being DFA'd. We have the Rule 5 draft, which is today, Wednesday, as you're listening to this. We have the MLB draft lottery. We have the Tigers making a pitch to Roki Sasaki. There are, and then as I said in the cold open, a lot of comments from the front office about what the rest of the offseason could look like, and plenty more as well. So let's get right into it here. We don't have enough time to, unfortunately, just dawdle and kind of catch up with each other. So Alex Cobb, 1 year, $15 million for the Detroit Tigers in 2025. There's a $1 million vesting option, $1 million bonus rather, for if he hits 140 innings pitched, and then another $1 million if he hits 150 innings pitched. So I don't care about the bonus at all. That's fine. That's pretty standard. Most contracts these days have incentives to hit certain amount of innings pitched or games played or whatever. That's totally fine. I don't really care. $1 million for each one. Great. I'm not going to lie to you. 15 mil for Alex Cobb does seem a little rich, given the fact that he is in his late 30s and through 16 innings of baseball last year. Now, I would like to think that this front office didn't just give him $15 million for no reason, and that there was a market for him, and they identified a guy that they wanted, and they thought that they could maximize and get the most out of, and hopefully he's great. And I can remember coming on this show and saying that I thought Flaherty's contract was a little rich, and a lot of the general public thought that the Flaherty contract was a little rich, and that ended up working out incredibly well. Now, obviously, Flaherty is about 10 years younger almost than Alex Cobb, so certainly a little bit of different situations there, but both one-year deals with the Tigers, and both of them, Cobb for injury and Flaherty for performance, were not believed to have had very huge markets in the offseason, and the Tigers walk away with a $15 million deal. Now, at the end of the day, it's a one-year deal. I don't really care that much, to be honest with you. If this was a 3-year deal that we gave him for 15 AAV at 37 years old, then yeah, I'd be coming on here and complaining about it, and it would be a much different conversation. But I don't know. You need to really disgustingly overpay for someone for me to get upset over a 1-year deal. That's it would take a lot. It's one season, man. Even if he's not good in May, they can cut ties with him and just count their losses and pay him out and give him the rest of his contract or whatever and DFA him, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't have an issue with it. I'm not super upset about it, but I do look at the number of 15 mil and I go, wow, that's, it's a little bit more expensive than I thought it was going to be. And if we are having the conversation about Scott Harris having a budget, which, as I've said a million times, I'm not sure if that's how the relationship with the president of baseball operations, and Chris Ilitch, the owner, is with the Detroit Tigers. I have no clue if that's how it works, where Ilitch is like, hey, you have this much money to spend this winter, don't go over it. Or if it's a little bit more fluid than that, I have no clue. So if it is a hard set budget, then yeah, I'm not going to be thrilled about 15 mil. But as I started off with, it's 1 year. And Alex Cobb's had a sub-4 ERA for going on 4 seasons now. So assuming he can come back healthy, I have faith that this pitching coaching staff is going to get the most out of him. And I think he'll be an asset, a valuable addition to the bottom half of this rotation. Hopefully he can stay healthy and hit those incentive marks as well. The question I had, much more so than anything surrounding Alex Cobb when this salary was announced, was because that was announced, and then Max Fried to the Yankees, which we'll talk about a little bit more here, was announced. And I'm just going through, all of these starting pitchers are seemingly getting paid a lot of money. The starting pitching market seems to be very, very pro pitcher and not pro organization at the moment. A lot of big money contracts being thrown around for starting pitchers. And it just made me wonder if that means that the market for all starting pitchers is maybe going up, at least healthy starting pitchers. And if that possibly opens the door for a trade with the Tigers where they trade a starting pitcher on their 40-man roster or just in their organization, whatever, and bring in a bat. And I'm not sure there's a fit there. I think the depth starters that the Tigers have are a little bit too big of question marks, production-wise and value-wise, for me to be like super confident, I guess I'll say, that another organization would be super willing to give up valuable offensive assets to bring them in. But you look at the group of like Casey Mize, Matt Manning, Sawyer Gibson-Long is about to be healthy, which I can't wait to watch him pitch again. Brant Herter, and then even like Kenta Maeda, I guess. Ty Madden, right? Like you have this group of depth starting pitching. And I just, if you were in the market to bring another starting pitcher, which we'll talk about later in the show, because apparently we're not, then I feel like you should maximize the starting pitching value in the starting pitching market for where it is currently at. And so that was just the thought I had. I don't know if there's any legs to that, and they might be totally fine with the starting pitching depth that they do have. They clearly can keep their heads above water and survive for a couple of months without a full rotation. They proved that in 2024, but that's not how they want to live either. And I'm sure they want to end the season. I'm hoping they want to end the season with a full rotation of healthy starting pitchers for the first time in what feels like a decade. So we'll see what happens. But that was just a corresponding thought I had to, wow, Alex Cobb, 15 mil. Wow, Max Fried, 220 mil. Like, maybe starting pitching is healthy. Starting pitching is a hot commodity. But there's also a difference between Max Fried and Alex Cobb. And then there's an even, maybe not bigger difference, but there is also a difference between Alex Cobb and, Matt Manning, who spent almost all of this season in AAA. So we'll see what happens with the starting pitching market and where it develops. But I think that would be something that, if my last name was Harris instead of Bentley, that's something that I would kick the tires on. It's just like, okay, if this is really how valuable they are, let's see how valuable they are in the trade market. We'll see. Okay, I want to move on to the corresponding move. Alex Cobb added to the Tigers 40-man roster. Akil Baddoo designated for assignment, the end of an era. We will talk about that and more right after this. Got to talk to you today about our friends over at FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place a live bet on the NFL all in one place. When you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place all of your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com today. Again, you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, everybody, welcome back here. Segment 2 of Locked On Tigers. Appreciate y'all for tuning in, as always, making us your first listen every single day. Shout out to the everydayers that do tune in every day. We will, of course, be back tomorrow recapping the last full day of winter meetings. We'll recap the Rule 5 draft, which we'll talk about here in a second, and so much more. So we discussed starting pitching. We discussed Alex Cobb a little bit. We'll talk about starting pitching a little bit more later on in this episode, but Akil Baddoo was the corresponding move for adding Alex Cobb. The 40-man roster was at 40 men before Alex Cobb was signed, so somebody had to get DFA'd, and that is unfortunately Akil Baddoo. You know, I mentioned earlier in the offseason that I thought that in a perfect world you would trade Akil Baddoo, and that he probably did still have a little bit of trade value. This leads me to believe that he did not have really much of any trade value, which also makes sense. I understand that I was kind of beating the drum of like, hey, you know, there's still a profile here, and I am certain that he will get work, whether it's on a minor league deal staying within the Tigers organization, or whether it's a minor league deal, or heck, even a 40-man roster spot somewhere else in the league. I am certain he will continue to get work because of the fact that he is fast and has some power and has good decision-making on what balls to swing at and improve defensively, right? Like he still has his age quite a bit going for him, but at the end of the day, he barely hit last year. And that's like 2 calendar years in a row that he has really struggled to hit in any capacity. And I think the biggest detriment, which isn't his fault at all, and with most organizations in the history of the sport, this is a huge plus, but unfortunately, he's a lefty corner outfielder. This team, this organization is littered with lefty corner outfielders at the present moment. There is just no need to hold on to Akil Baddoo. And again, clearly he didn't have very much trade value, or else I'm sure they would have got something even small done with him, or I don't know, maybe a bigger deal, and he was kind of added on at the very end, whatever. Clearly that was not the case. Brought one of the more fun moments of like the rough stretch of Tigers baseball that was the last 10 years, right? Rule 5 draft, people are complaining, talking about how it's not a good pick. We don't know who he is. And he starts off his major league career with just absolute electricity and walk-offs and grand slams, and he takes the entire league by storm. It wasn't just a local thing. This was MLB, nationwide, talking about Akil Baddoo, this Rule 5 pick for the Tigers, who have been terrible for, at that point, 7-8 years in a row. It was awesome. Akil Baddoo mania is something that I will never forget, and was a really, really fun part of the 2021 season. And there was a lot of hope that he could be an everydayer at some point. And unfortunately, again, doesn't seem like that's the case. We'll see what happens with him. I'm sure the Tigers, in a perfect world, would like to keep him in the organization, but he might have too much demand, or just any demand somewhere else. And that's his prerogative if he wants to go try his luck somewhere else, assuming another team's interested in him. So best of luck no matter what happens. We'll keep tabs on that. I'm sure we'll know by the end of the week kind of where the organization and Baddoo kind of stand with each other. And just, thank you for a really, really, really fun Tigers lore kind of memory that I'm sure a lot of people are not going to forget anytime soon. So shout out Akil Baddoo, DFA'd on Tuesday to make room for Alex Cobb. The roster is now back at 40, obviously, with this DFA. Now, the Rule 5 draft is Wednesday, and that is always one of the last events of winter meetings. People will start heading out, Thursday during the day usually. So Tuesday, Wednesday afternoon, the Tigers have the 19th pick in the Rule 5 draft. And if they are to take someone, then they will have to DFA somebody else to make room for them. As far as players who will be kind of on the chopping block and have the potential to possibly get DFA'd if they are to take a player or multiple players in the Rule 5 draft, I am genuinely still shocked that Mason Englert is on this 40-man roster. I have predicted him to get DFA'd about 6 different times in the last 3 months. I will do it again. I wish him the best. I hope that he can figure out, the fastball thing, which has been a huge issue for him. He just doesn't have a major league fastball. But I am, shout out Mason Englert. Like I'm genuinely surprised he's still here. I'd imagine he will be on the fringe. Ryan Kreidler probably as well. Bailey Horn, too, somebody that the Tigers just picked up off waivers a few weeks ago. I'd imagine those 3 guys will be in the conversation for making room for somebody. Now, it's also important to note that they don't have to take anybody. And considering they're not going to get a top 15 pick, so you're not picking from the I guess we'll say, quote unquote, the cream of the crop. This is the Rule 5 draft. Like, these are guys that aren't good enough to be on 40-man rosters at the end of the day. So that's why you don't see too many Rule 5 like major success stories, although there are obviously some. I think there is a higher likelihood that they take nobody than they do take somebody. And if they are to take someone, I would imagine it is a pitcher. Look, there's a couple of bats that I think are going to be in consideration here. Cooper Bowman was at one point a decently regarded prospect for the Athletics. He's still, prospect status still ranked in their top 20 or 30 in the organization. He was unprotected. Second baseman. He might be a guy that some teams take a look at. Christian Franklin of the Cubs, outfielder. There's a chance there. Anthony Prado is like a super utility guy for Minnesota that draws walks and is a righty. Like, that kind of fits the profile of what the Tigers have been looking for. But at the end of the day, with position players, like, you got to be really sure, right? You don't have wiggle room to mess around with, like, oh, we're just going to keep this guy on the roster all year, just to keep him here and hope that he can stick throughout the entire course of the season. Like, you have 4 or 5 bench spots. Like, you just don't have the amount of roster room to really do that. So I would be surprised if with the 19th pick, given the fact that they were a playoff team last year, if they were going to take a position player in the Rule 5 draft. But it is also important to note that, like, pitchers can always get taken. Like, pitchers are in the Rule 5 are so weird. Like, there are literally guys that some people have like never heard of, or are, in single A somewhere and didn't pitch last year because they got Tommy John. And 70% of baseball pundits don't even know who he is, and he'll get taken with the 3rd pick in the Rule 5 because he threw 97 miles an hour 3 years ago. And it's like, all right, well, shoot, like, I guess I get it. Like, you're trying, like, that's why pitchers are just weird. And especially when you have an organization like the Tigers, who has found a lot of success developing pitchers lately. I think there's always a chance that they could take a pitcher. Do I think it's likely? Again, no. You look at the wiggle room they have in the bullpen. I think they're going to want to stick with what they have in the 40-man roster. I don't think there's too many expendable options there. Horn and Englert obviously are too, but they have internal solutions to fill those as well. And if there's nobody in the back end of the Rule 5 draft, guys that aren't even good enough to be on 40-man rosters, then I guess what I'm trying to say is I'm expecting them to skip the pick and not take anybody. But if they do take someone, we will obviously talk about that. The flip side of this conversation is they could also lose someone, multiple players. The Dodgers lose like 15 players every season in the Rule 5 draft. So let's talk about who could be taken away from the Tigers organization. And then we'll get to some other comments made by the Tigers front office here right after this. All right, everybody, welcome back. Your third and final segment of Locked On Tigers. Appreciate y'all for tuning in, as always. I'll kind of reiterate the point I made before the break there about potential players to lose in the Rule 5. Any pitcher. Organizations know what they can develop out of pitchers. They know what they're looking for in pitchers. That is why, Tyler Holton was DFA'd at one point, right? Like, it's just, they're so weird. I don't want to just repeat myself and just retread the same conversation, but it goes out the same way that it goes in with that conversation, right? Like, any organization could look at any pitcher we have available and just be like, oh yeah, maybe. So keep that in mind. Position players, some people brought up Gage Workman. I mean, maybe. I would be kind of surprised if somebody, given his track record, like he had a really good second half of this season and really hasn't hit as a professional outside of that period. So that would seem like a major reaction to crushing Double-A for a little bit. I don't know. That seems a little bit far-fetched to me, but there's a chance he's a really good defender, can play multiple positions, and did objectively crush the baseball for a lot of 2024 here. And then the only player that I'm really kind of worried about, and not even worried in the sense of, like he's going to turn into a superstar somewhere else, but somebody that I really don't want to lose, but I also don't think you can justify putting him on the 40-man right now, is Roberto Campos, one of the biggest names in Tigers prospect lore over the last 6 or 7 years now. And I think that, he's unprotected. I would be shocked if he was taken. I think he is still very raw and still has a long way to go before he is in solidified everyday major league talent. But he's somebody else that I am really holding my breath on, making sure he is still a part of the Tigers organization after Wednesday. Other news and notes, Roki Sasaki is being pitched by the Detroit Tigers. And look, I know that I don't want to be a jerk. I really don't want to be like a Debbie Downer and be the guy that is, like Scrooge and is like, oh, you shouldn't be excited. Like, you be a fan however you want to be a fan. The Tigers are, and Scott Harris mentioned that they are making a pitch and making a presentation to Sasaki, and they are going to try to bring him in. My reaction to that is, like, I would hope so. He's going to cost a couple $1 million. This is not a bidding war. So it's international signing money. So as far as I'm concerned, all 30 teams should be pitching Sasaki. He's one of the best players in the entire free agent market. He's the number one international free agent. He instantly is going to become one of, if not the best pitching prospect in the game of baseball. And he's going to cost like $5 million. Like, yeah, man, I would hope that you're going to pitch him. I do not think that he's going to be a Detroit Tiger, even though there are reports that he's maybe not looking for, the super big market, and he might be looking for a little bit more of a smaller or medium-sized market to transition over to America in. There's he's stressing the importance of pitching development. There's all of these stipulations that are coming public, and people are like, oh, like the Tigers check these boxes. That's awesome. And I hope with every ounce of my being that this dude is a Detroit Tiger. That would be the coolest thing ever. Seriously, that would be awesome, right? But outside of the big market, small market thing, every single one of those check boxes that is like going viral, the pitching development and the will to win and all that stuff that matters to him, outside of market size, which obviously doesn't, the Dodgers still check all of those boxes. I've just been hurt so many times that I'm just like, you know what? I'm not going to believe But I still think that this is an absolute Hail Mary. And I would hope, again, that is doing your job. Every single front office in baseball should be pitching Roki Sasaki. He's one of the most prized possessions of the offseason and doesn't cost you anything. Yes, please do. I'd be upset if you weren't. I'd be very upset if you weren't. But that doesn't mean I actually think he's going to be a Tiger either. So we'll see what happens. Again, I'm not trying to be like, grumpy about it and be like, oh, you shouldn't be excited. Be excited. Get false hope. It's fun to root for things and be happy. Please do. Don't let me get in the way. But those are my expectations, as that is my job here to relay. Outside of Sasaki, it sounds like the Tigers are done trying to add starting pitching. That was a quote from Jeff Greenberg, the general manager of the Detroit Tigers, said that outside of the pitch for Sasaki, the Tigers are pretty good with where they're at with starting pitching. This is weird to me for a lot of reasons, and I hate it. I hate it because, as I mentioned at the top of the show, I am so desperate to just get through a freaking season with a fully healthy rotation. And I'm not saying the same guys that are in the rotation on opening day have to be the guys on game 182 or 162 rather, goodness. But I am asking for just 5 healthy starting pitchers when the season ends, which we haven't had in forever. I hate this. I really do. I absolutely cannot stand that this mindset that we're just done adding starting pitching. I understand. I listed the names earlier: Mize, Manning, Sir Gibson Long, Brant Herter, Kader Montero, Kenta Maeda, Ty Madden. I understand that you have bodies there, but if you looked around and your interpretation of the rotation was, you know what, we got 15 to 20 mil to play with. We need to only add one starting pitcher, and I'm content with the depth. Let's go after Alex Cobb. Then I'm going to have a lot more of an issue with that. And that's nothing against Alex Cobb. And I think he's going to be, I honestly seem to be a little bit more optimistic and pleased with the signing than some other people do. I think he's going to be fine, and he's going to be a good addition to the rotation. But don't let your foot off the gas pedal. Like, keep going. And the number one priority absolutely should be adding offense. So if your budget entails, okay, well, we have X amount of dollars left, we got to go spend on offense, then good, please do. Yes, you do need to do that. Absolutely. But then I would argue you should have used the $15 million a little bit differently that you had set aside to address starting pitching. Either way, I don't like it. Either they're telling the truth, and that's how they utilize the one starting pitching signing they had, or you have the resources to go get more starting pitching, and you just aren't for some reason. It's I think the reason it's most baffling to me is because we have heard Scott Harris say 1 billion times since he has taken office that they will always want to go after more starting pitching. He said that's not even one time he has said something along those lines. It's multiple. He's like, yeah, we will always look into starting pitching. We're always willing to add starting pitching. And now we sign Alex Cobb, and magically that opinion has changed for the first time in 3 years. Does not compute to me, but we'll see. AJ Hinch gave an update on Javi Baez and his injury situation. Really not too much to take out of it, just that they are working a lot with him. The organization has been in contact with him. They have players and not players, training staff and medical staff and whatnot going down to see him in Florida and in Puerto Rico often. And they have some faith that he's going to be ready to go and hopefully in the best shape of his life come spring training. So we'll see how that works out. That's everything I got. Thanks for making Locked On Tigers your first listen every single day. Shout out to every dayers that do tune in every day. We will, of course, be back tomorrow recapping the Rule 5 draft, the last full day of winter meetings, any other news and notes. We'll talk a little bit about, again, about Arenado for like the 15th time tomorrow. Not going to take super long, but he has narrowed down a wish list of teams. The Tigers are not on it. I'll save you the drama, but we'll talk a little bit about that tomorrow. And then obviously as well as any and all other news that comes out of this last day of winter meetings here on Wednesday. All right. Appreciate you all greatly. Peace and love. Going to therapy's dope. It's almost midnight. I'm going to bed. Go Tigers, baby.